In 1865, after Lincoln delivers the Emancipation Proclamation and the end of the Civil War, the 13th Amendment was passed in Congress and it abolished slavery in the United States. This amendment freed approximately 4 million slaves which were previously confined in plantations and sold as property. This change in status was marked as a new era, the Reconstruction. The newly freed black people were obviously overjoyed that they could now find their own jobs and get an education at a public school. However, white men were not so happy. Riots broke out in common places, and racism was still prominent across the southern region, causing segregation in schools, neighborhoods, and even the workplace. Disputes broke out over etiquette. A black man doesn't tip his hat when a white man walks by, and suddenly people are shooting at each other. State governments created the Black Codes, which further oppressed black people with the title of equal. The Black Codes were laws issued by southern states. In 1868, the federal government was able to see the problem with the codes and pass the 14th Amendment, which granted black people the same basic rights as white people. After the North won the Civil War and slavery was abolished, Southern white people were angry that their slaves, which they spent a lot of money on, were no longer their property and were not around to do housework or field work. Black people were also now allowed to have jobs that only white people were previously allowed to have, and they could also get an education in public school. White people took this act of the Reconstruction as a threat to their ranking in society. Because of this loss of income and social status, Southern governments created the Black Codes. Codes were designed to replace the social controls of slavery. All the tools the Southern state governments originally used to oppress the black people were implemented again by the Southern states. The codes controlled huge aspects of their lives, such as employment laws and curfews. In many states, black people were forced to work all days of the year and were unable to leave their employer without written permission. If a black worker was to leave his job, he would have to forfeit all wages for that year, up to the time of quitting. Black codes also differed from state to state. The Louisiana Black Codes state that black people may only gather in large groups between sunrise and sunset, and only with the permission of the captain or patrol. Black people were also forbidden to carry firearms, sell, barter, or exchange goods or services without permission from an employer. In Mississippi, the Black Code state that blacks and mulattoes may intermarry, but no person of black descent is permitted to marry a white man or woman. Violent acts of racism continued after the Black Codes went into effect. In 1866, the Memphis Race Riot killed 46 African Americans and destroyed 90 houses, schools, and churches belonging to the black community. During the New Orleans Race Riot, policemen killed over 40 black people and white Republicans and left more than 150 people injured. These acts of violence led to the ratification of the 14th Amendment in 1868, and later the 15th Amendment in 1870. They granted black people the right to the same basic rights as white citizens and gave black men the right to vote. White Southerners showed resentment of the new amendments and were committed to showing their supremacy and the survival of plantation, agriculture, and post-war years. Because of their resentment towards the new amendments, the Southern state governments ignored the ratification of the new amendments, and the Black Codes continued through the late 1800s to the early 1900s when radical racism died out. All in all, we conclude that because of the creation of the Black Codes after the Civil War, the era called the Reconstruction is deemed ineffective because the Black Codes created a system that counteracted the purpose for the North winning the Civil War.